know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? Hey, I just look like this. Do get your popcorn ready.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Fantasy First. This is going to be episode 2, where we're going to talk some draft strategy. There's many ways to win in fantasy football, and we're just going to kind of go over some of the basics. Whether you take that quarterback, whether you go with the running back or the wide receiver, because everybody knows in today's day and age, it's a pass-first league. So we're going to jump right into the quarterback-first strategy. There's basically 4, maybe 5 if you count Brady, but with the suspension, there's basically 4 name quarterbacks that you have to pay that elite price for. And that's Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck, Drew Brees, and good old Peyton Manning. Those are the big 4. Now, I personally put Luck and Rodgers in another tier, but you're still going to have to pay probably a second, late third round at most for a guy like Brees, for a guy like Manning, because even though Manning had a bad season, 39 touchdowns, that's still pretty good. So you're going to have to pay top dollar for a commodity such as Peyton Manning. So let's talk about the pros of going with a quarterback first. Consistency. You know that these guys are going to put up crap tards of points. Okay? I can't even remember the last time that Aaron Rodgers put up like less than 20 points. It was probably that Seahawks game. And then from there on out, it was just bombs away because Aaron Rodgers is a bad man, and we all know that. Another pro I would say to the quarterback first strategy is injury risk. While yes, Rodgers did lose 8 games in his 2013 campaign to a broken collarbone, generally quarterbacks are getting hit a lot less than their running back and wide receiver counterparts. So you do feel a little bit safer there, rightfully so. Most signal callers aren't touched. Especially if they have good offensive lines, especially if they're in systems that are getting the ball quick out of their hands. And again, another pro is volume. These guys have the ball in their hands every single play, and they plan on throwing it most of the time. When you got guys like Andre Johnson, T.Y. Hilton, a Randall Cobb, a Jordy Nelson, a Demaryius Thomas, you got stud playmakers on the outside that also help the value of a quarterback. Now the cons, again, high price. Are you going to be the guy that says, I'm going to take a quarterback in the first, second, or third rounds? Little too high for me, especially with how shallow the running back position is nowadays. It's really tough to find good, consistent depth at the running back and wide receiver positions. Also, another con, it's hard to sit on a not so good matchup. If you drafted Aaron Rodgers last year, were you sitting him week 1? He didn't put up a lot of points, and let's be honest, it's hard to sit a name guy like Aaron Rodgers. So when I look at this 2015 fantasy draft this year, and I look at the talent from top to bottom, there just seems to be more value at the quarterback position than ever before. I'll just start running off names. Rodgers, Luck, Brady, Manning, Brees, Newton, Wilson, Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, Tony Romo, Phillip Rivers. You can even go deeper than that. Derek Carr, Teddy Bridgewater, a guy I like, my personal sleeper at quarterback this year, Ryan Tannehill. These are all guys that could potentially put up a lot of fantasy points for you. So that brings me to my next argument here is, am I willing to take the big price and pay for that quarterback? And for me, the answer is no. I'm not going to be employing that strategy. Now, if you do employ that strategy, make sure you do your homework. You're going to need to pick up last year's Justin Forsett. You're going to have to pick up last year's Odell Beckham. Nobody saw Odell in preseason. The hammy bothered him all year, or all off season. So that's why he wasn't drafted. We didn't get to see what this kid was capable of. So he was someone that was picked up off of waivers. I remember back in the 2012 season, Randall Cobb kind of just bursted out of nowhere, So if you do employ that quarterback high strategy, make sure you have backup plans at the skill positions, because it's going to be a long day for you if you don't have somebody there. Again, running backs, wide receivers, you need to start 2, and in some leagues you're starting 3 wide receivers every week. Quarterback, you're only starting 1 guy, and that's my argument. Too much depth there. If you go with that strategy, odds are you're going to make the playoffs because your quarterback will carry you. Everybody remember in 2013 when Aaron Rodgers dropped 6 touchdowns against Houston? How about in the start of that 2013 season, Peyton Manning 7 touchdowns. So you're definitely going to have days where those guys go off. But does anybody remember Ryan Fitzpatrick 5 touchdown performance last year? I'm pretty sure nobody drafted Ryan Fitzpatrick. So while I like the elite QB, I think I'm going to pass on that strategy. Okay, so we just got done digressing about quarterbacks, their value, what kind of price you're going to have to pay for one of those elite signal callers. Let's talk about skill players, okay? Because skill players are a big, big, big asset to your fantasy roster. So let's say you're picking, I don't know, let's say you're picking 5th overall, right? And, someone picks Adrian, maybe an elite wide receiver, maybe Gronk's gone, right? So you're 5th overall. You might think about that safe quarterback position, but don't rush that decision because there is a short supply of elite running backs. At number 5, if I can get a guy like Eddie Lacy, maybe even a LaShawn McCoy, okay, put that top-tier running back on my fantasy roster, I'm feeling pretty good. And then, at the second turnabout, in the second round, who knows, maybe a Jordy Nelson, maybe a Alshon Jeffrey. AJ Green might be great value this year because he suffered the toe injury all last year. And when he did play, he was a stud, for the exception of the times when he did play hurt. So when we talk about this type of strategy, okay, it's nice to have that RB1 and that WR1 manning those roster spots, okay? So every week you're going to start a guy there. So it makes it easier to play matchups in your RB2, WR2 slots. Deeper in the draft, maybe I get a Brandon Cooks. Maybe I get a DeAndre Hopkins. We talk about how much depth there is at quarterback. There's depth at the other skill positions too, but there's not a large amount of depth when you're talking about elite talent, okay? When it comes to quarterback now, let's talk about the depth. Let's say I put a LaShawn McCoy and an Alshon Jeffrey on my roster. I'm set there at RB1 and WR1. Later in the draft, round 10, Ryan Tannehill. Round 8, you talk about Ben McAdoo's West Coast system with Eli Manning. Again, as much as I hate to admit it, Tony Romo was the highest scoring fantasy quarterback in the month of December, so he does make this list in terms of value-based drafting. I'm pretty sure Tony Romo was an 7th, 8th round fantasy choice. What about Phillip Rivers? He tossed 30 scores, okay? Now you add a Melvin Gordon onto his roster, you might see a little bit more single coverage down the field. That could help his fantasy potential. What about Ben Roethlisberger? Look at the talent around him. This guy's got Antonio Brown. You've got a stud burner in 6'5" Martavis Bryant. And when Bell comes back, you've pretty much got a hybrid wide receiver running back coming out of the backfield running routes for you. Okay? What about a guy like Cam Newton? What about a guy like really late Colin Kaepernick if you're trying to bank in on those rushing yards? So we come back to the skill position players, okay? And I think it just behooves everybody to use value-based drafting, get yourself a quarterback late, and stack up at the skill positions. Now, you can go running back. Let's say you're picking 9th and DeMarco Murray's still sitting there in a Chip Kelly system. Maybe on the roundabout, you saw the end of the season that C.J. Anderson had, okay? He has Peyton Manning. He has Gary Kubiak's zone blocking scheme that helped Justin Forsett be a top, I believe it was 7-8 running back. What about a guy like Jeremy Hill, who had the most rushing yards in the final, I believe it was 9 or 10 games of the year? Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that something in the neighborhood like that was what he placed. So maybe I go running back, and in the 3rd round on the way back, maybe I put another wide receiver on my team. Do I buy stock in the Andre Johnson, Andrew Luck connection? Do I go with another rookie wide receivers later? Maybe I decide I want a Nelson Aguilar, or maybe I decide I want a Brashad Perryman. There's more depth to it receiver, but I would still feel more comfortable if I had at least 2 stud running backs or a stud running back and a stud wide receiver. Now, the last 3 years that I've won my fantasy league, that was the strategy I employed. I got myself a stud running back each of those 3 years. I had Jamal Charles when he had 19 total touchdowns. Okay, I used the first round pick last year on Demaryius Thomas in a PPR league. Okay, and actually, let's talk about PPR for a second, because quarterbacks don't get points from a PPR league, point per reception. So that makes those stud running backs that catch passes like Jamal Charles, like Eddie Lacy, like LaShawn McCoy, all those guys, value gets bumped even more because of them catching passes. Okay? What if I'm in the second round and Calvin Johnson's still there, because his value will be lowered after a 1,077-yard injury-plagued season? He's only 29 years old, which is crazy, right? I mean, the guy's been in the league since 2007 and he's 29. I will suck up that value all day. If I'm sitting in the middle of my draft in the second round and the debate is between Calvin Johnson or Andrew Luck, that decision is easy for me. Easy. It's like robbing candy from a baby. Give me Calvin. Thank you. Okay? And I'll put Eli Manning, I'll put Matt Ryan, I'll put a bunch of these value guys on my roster, and I'll play matchups. I mean, you can even go deeper. Do you talk about Jay Cutler? You talk about a potential healthy Carson Palmer? These are all very competent streaming options. And I heard in a podcast that I was listening to today that the goal of a streamer is really to find a guy so you don't have to stream, and that is kind of true. But yeah, so that kind of wraps up today's draft strategy video. The moral of the story here is I've won my leagues by taking value quarterbacks and playing matchups, and that's kind of the strategy that I'm recommending that you guys take. So thank you so much for watching. If you made it through, I think it was like a 10-minute episode. I really appreciate it. Come back. We'll have another video soon. We're going to start diving into the nitty-gritty of players you should take. And keep it locked in, guys. Remember, high stakes, sports debates, fantasy first. Thank you so much. High stakes, sports debates.